Emmy Award winner, Grammy Award winner, comedian. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Kathy Griffin, Grammy Award winning, Emmy Award winning comedian, and comedy fugitive.
We got to get the elephant in the room.
Yeah, the elephant in the room.
Right?
Okay,
Let's do
so
it.
I took a picture, totally covered by the First Amendment. So all the Trumpies yelling, lock her up. And the idea that 60 million Americans thought I was in ISIS is now funny. It wasn't funny a year ago, but now I don't think I'm the prototype of an ISIS recruit. Also at 57, I might break a hip. But, you got to keep lighthearted about it. But, I really was the only American put under a 2-month investigation by 2 federal agencies. And the idea that your taxpayer dollars were going toward whether or not the DOJ was going to charge me, Kathy Griffin, with conspiracy to assassinate the President of the United States, which holds a life sentence, is a frightening thing. And you can not like that picture all you want, but you need to know it's covered by the First Amendment. So I have to stand by it, as I stand by everything from my vulgar language to someone else's right to have vulgar language. But what I don't like is how the white supremacist movement has tried to co-opt the First Amendment, because there is a difference between free speech and yelling fire in a theater. Right, so I would argue that the Nazis and the Charlottesville guys and all those guys, they're trying to act like, I'm sure you've seen Alex Jones popping off.
Yeah, Alex Jones was here this week with having a fight with Senator Marco Rubio.
I'm asking you not to touch me.
He got banned from Twitter for a while.
Yeah.
So what's the difference between what you say and what somebody like Alex Jones says?
I think it's important that people remember the analogy, which is it's illegal to yell fire in a theater for one reason. I believe the fire in question was literally the I think it was called the St. Angela's fire, and it led to people getting trampled and dying. So that's why it's easy to think, like, oh, it'd be funny to yell fire in a theater, except that when it actually happened, they then wrote a law saying, this is not for the First Amendment, this is not freedom of speech. People have died. And now that we live in a world where it's encouraged by I call him the accidental president. Sometimes I call him the precedent, because one time he was so stupid, he actually tweeted, I'm so happy to be your precedent. And he didn't even spell check. But the fact that these guys are now trying to label themselves as First Amendment heroes is a joke to me, because I know the First Amendment back and forth. It's my commodity. It's what I deal in. It's how I make my living. So there's a reason it's the First Amendment. But there is a big difference between what these Nazi dudes are doing, which is truly trying to gin up acts of violence like the famous Comet Pizza Parlor incident, where they joked about it until a guy showed up and shot up the place.
Yeah, I want to ask you one more thing about the elephant before we move on. What happened afterwards, and how did people treat you?
Well, I'm still dealing with the fallout from the photo in everyday life. I mean, I was walking down the street last week and 4 people came up to me and just were screaming, you're a traitor, you're an ISIS. Like I said, it's almost comical, and I'm, like, oh yeah, ISIS is recruiting a lot of 57-year-old red-haired Irish comedians. Yeah, that's their first choice. I was on the no-fly list, and I had to be interrogated, like I said, by the feds under oath. That also didn't happen to any of the other guys who supposedly threatened the president. And I was singled out, and I think it's because I'm a woman, and probably because I'm 57 and I don't have a big network or studio behind me, and I was able to.
It's almost like you were black. Right?
I know. I'm not saying I'm invited to the cookout.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I'm happy to stand outside the fence, and I'm happy to have the potato salad with raisins. But then I could get work overseas, and that was fascinating. So
your tour has been overseas already.
My tour has been overseas already, but I'm on the Interpol list. So I was detained at every single airport, and I played 15 countries in 23 cities. And I got to be honest, that should not happen to an American comedian. Mm-hmm. So like I said, you can hate that picture all you want, but you shouldn't be put on the Interpol list like you're a terrorist.
How did it end?
I was exonerated. I had to go through the whole process. I talk about it in the tour. And I really get into the meat and bones of it in the tour, because a lot of people don't know that part. They think, oh, she got in a little trouble. She got blacklisted in Hollywood for a minute. But that stuff is still happening. And unfortunately, people in Hollywood can sometimes be the last ones to come around.
Was it worth it?
Yes, it was worth it, because believe it or not, the picture that almost took me down is the picture that allowed me to tour globally for the first time. I mean, I played Reykjavik, Iceland. I sold out the Sydney Opera House. I sold out the London Palladium. I played Helsinki, of all places. I wish I would have had a show the night of that summit, but I went everywhere. And so now it's I'm known as the crazy red-haired lady who took that picture everywhere. And believe it or not, at first, America was still in shock and awe, but overseas, you know, they're used to that imagery with Der Spiegel, Charlie Hebdo, et cetera. And so when I went overseas, there was never an incident where people thought I was actually in Al-Qaeda or ISIS or any of this nonsense.
You're going to be performing at the Daughters of the American Revolution, Constitution Hall. You know the story, 1939, Marian Anderson denied the ability as African-American women to perform at Constitution Hall. So you talk about the First Amendment. Now you, who have been through this entire story about yourself over the last couple of years with the president, you're going to perform there. How does it feel to sort of be in the footsteps of that kind of history?
You know, I'm very cognizant of my history, and I'm very cognizant of especially like the female comedians who went before me. So Moms Mabley, Toady Fields, Phyllis Diller, my dear departed friend Joan Rivers. Of course, I kind of like the more dangerous ladies, but any woman who broke a glass ceiling in any way, it absolutely trickles down to me. And believe it or not, even though I'm vulgar and I'm foul-mouthed and all that stuff, I really do like to set records for young women who want to be in comedy or have any kind of a dream, LGBT folks, people of color, marginalized in any way. And this administration has marginalized so many communities like I've never seen in my lifetime.
And what do you want the impact to be of Criminal Annex?
Well, look, I've always felt the best way to get a message across is through humor. So, I mean, like I said, I'm going for them so hard. I mean, let me just clarify something. The ironic thing about my 2-month investigation, which also cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal bills, and I said at the time, I said it very awkwardly, but I really did say, trust me, if this can happen to me, it can happen to you. And it happened to like John Brennan. So, I mean, this is something that is truly happening to everyday Americans. And let's not even get into the border crisis because, you know, these are asylum seekers. They're not illegals. So we have to work on everything like changing that stuff. But what I like to do and what I feel my job is if I can do it through humor, then I let the other folks kind of hit them hard with the facts and stuff like that. So I'm going to throw a few facts in there because with this administration, even the facts are ridiculous. But I try to take it so over the top, it's actually funny. Because frankly, we're living in a time that, and I've been doing stand-up a long time, I've never felt a phase in our government before, or even our country, where it's almost like you're like scared to tell certain jokes because they're so true. They're so real.
Do you censor yourself?
No, I don't censor myself at all.
So you're not driving with one foot on the brake?
Not at all. Especially after what I've been through.
But that doesn't give you pause?
No, it made me bolder and worse.
Kathy, thank you. You're going to be here tonight at the Criminal Annex, but this weekend you're going to be at
Saturday
DAR
night,
Constitution Hall.
DAR Constitution Hall, 8 o'clock. There are still some tickets left, and it's going to be a raucous show.